Welcome back to The Whole Story, where we are exploring the foundational stories of the Bible. I'm your host, Marcus.
And I'm Daniel. In our last episode, we saw humanity split onto two distinct paths after the first murder. There was the line of Cain, which spiraled into pride and escalating violence. And then there was the line of Seth, which carried the seed of hope, with people beginning to call upon the name of the Lord.
That's right. And today, we're covering a massive sweep of the story, Genesis chapters 5 through 9. We're going to see where those two paths ultimately lead, which culminates in one of the most famous and challenging stories in all of Scripture, Noah and the flood.
And we start in chapter 5 with a genealogy. Now, I know these lists of names can sometimes make our eyes glaze over, but this one sets a really important tone for what's to come.
It really does. As we read through the line of Seth, we hear this solemn, repeating refrain after almost every name. And he died. Adam lived 930 years, and he died. Seth lived 912 years, and he died. It's the new rhythm of the world, the consequence of the fall. Death is now the unavoidable punctuation mark at the end of every life.
It's like a drumbeat of mortality. But there are a couple of glimmers of hope in the list. The first is a man named Enoch. He breaks the pattern.
He does. The text says, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He's the one person who escapes the "and he died" refrain. This phrase, walked with God, signifies a deep, intimate, and obedient relationship. It's a sign that even in a world dominated by death, an escape is possible for those in close communion with God.
And the second glimmer of hope comes at the very end of the list, with the birth of Noah. His father prophesies that he will bring relief or comfort from the toil of working the cursed ground. So there's this expectation built around him.
There is, but by the time we get to chapter 6, the world he's born into has hit rock bottom. The way of Cain has completely overwhelmed the way of Seth. The diagnosis is stark. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
That is an absolute statement. Not just their actions, but the very source of their actions. Their hearts are totally corrupt.
It is, and this is where we get that strange passage about the sons of God and the daughters of men. While scholars debate whether this refers to fallen angels, corrupt kings, or the godly line of Seth intermarrying with the ungodly, the main point is clear. Every sphere of society had become corrupt and rebellious, leading to a world filled with violence.
And this leads to one of the most shocking and emotional verses in all of Scripture, where we see God's reaction.
It is, and the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart.
That's such a powerful phrase. It doesn't portray an angry, distant tyrant. It portrays a heartbroken creator, the grief of a parent who has been utterly rejected by their children.
That's exactly the emotion the author is conveying. The coming judgment doesn't flow from arbitrary rage, but from the profound sorrow of a loving creator whose beautiful creation has been marred by evil and violence.
But in the middle of that grief, the story turns on a single phrase. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
This is the introduction of grace into a world that deserves only judgment. God chooses to save a remnant. And why Noah? The text tells us Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. There's that phrase again, linking him directly back to Enoch, the man who escaped death.
So, God decides to wash the world clean and start over with this one righteous family. And he gives Noah the blueprint for a rescue mission: build an ark.
A vessel of salvation. The instructions are detailed and specific, and Noah's response is simple and profound. The text says, Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. His faith is demonstrated through his radical, unwavering obedience in the face of what must have seemed like a crazy command.
And then the flood comes, and the language used to describe it is just epic.
It's cosmic. The text says, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. This isn't just a lot of rain. This is a decreation. The author is intentionally using language that reverses Genesis 1. The waters from below and the waters from above, which God separated to create dry land, are now crashing back together.
So the world is being returned to the watery chaos from before creation began. That's a powerful and terrifying image of judgment.
It is. The judgment fits the crime. Humanity filled God's good world with chaos and violence, so God allows the world to return to chaos. The waters prevail for 150 days, but then, right at the center of the story, we get the hinge on which everything turns. But God remembered Noah.
Which, as we've learned, doesn't mean God forgot about him. It means God is now acting on his promise to save him.
Exactly. This is the moment of divine faithfulness. A wind blows over the earth, just like the Spirit of God hovering over the waters in Genesis 1, and the waters begin to recede. A new creation is dawning.
And after all that time on the ark, what's the first thing Noah does when he steps onto dry land?
It's incredibly significant. He builds an altar and offers a sacrifice. His first act is not to build a shelter or find food, but to worship. And this act of faith moves God to make a promise in his heart. I will never again curse the ground because of man. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done.
So even though he knows the human heart is still the problem, God commits himself to a new way of dealing with humanity.
Yes, and this internal promise is then formalized in chapter 9 as the Noahic covenant. He blesses Noah and his family with the original creation mandate, be fruitful and multiply. And he makes a binding promise, a covenant, not just with humanity, but with all of creation.
And he gives a sign for this covenant.
The rainbow. He does, and it's a beautiful sign. The ancient word for rainbow is the same as the word for a warrior's bow. The image here is of God hanging up his war bow in the clouds, pointed away from the earth, as a sign to himself to remember his promise of peace. It's a stunning symbol of grace becoming the new governing principle for the world.
The story could end there, on that perfect high note. But it doesn't. We get this really tragic and strange story about Noah getting drunk in his Kent.
And it's one of the most important parts of the whole narrative. The righteous hero, the new Adam, plants a vineyard, gets drunk, and lies naked and exposed. It's a sad echo of Adam's fall in the garden. And when his son Ham acts shamefully while his other sons act with honor, the same pattern of sin, shame, and curse re-enters the story.
So the point is that the flood couldn't fix the fundamental problem.
Exactly. The flood washed away sinners, but it couldn't wash away sin itself. Even the best of humanity, the righteous Noah, is still fallen. The human heart remains the problem. The world needs more than a reset. It needs a rescue from within.
So as we close out this massive story, what's the main takeaway for us?
I think the story holds two crucial truths in tension. First, God's holiness is real. He takes evil and violence seriously, and his judgment against it is severe. But second, his grace and his covenant commitment to his creation are even more powerful. His ultimate desire is not to destroy, but to save and preserve.
So humanity gets a second chance, but we're left knowing that the core problem hasn't been solved. The search for that promised offspring, the one who can truly fix what's broken, has to continue.
Precisely. The stage is reset, but the actors are still flawed. And as we'll see next time, humanity's next great project would be another attempt to solve their own problems and reach for the heavens on their own terms. Join us next time as we explore Genesis 10:11, the Table of Nations and the Tower of Babel, humanity's next attempt to make a name for themselves apart from God.